Thank you all for joining today. I'm excited to share with you all the work of CCSSO's Instructional Materials and Professional Development Network and highlight the great work that the Nebraska Department of Education has accomplished within the network. My name is Leslie Hesketh, and I'm a Senior Project Manager at CCSSO and the co-lead of our IMPD network. For those that may not be familiar with CCSSO, we're a nonpartisan nationwide nonprofit organization that supports public officials at state departments of education. I'm excited to be joined today by Marissa Pazant, and Marissa, I'll let you do a quick introduction as well.
Hi, everybody. Marissa Pazant. I'm the Assistant Administrator and the Director of Content Area Standards for the Office of Teaching, Learning, and Assessment here at the Nebraska Department of Education. Glad to be joining today.
So CCSSO leads a network of states called our Instructional Materials and Professional Development Network, or you'll hear me say the IMPD Network. That provides technical assistance to 13 states that are intentionally providing supports, guidance, and funding to school districts to adopt and implement high-quality instructional materials. And you'll often hear me say HQIM instead of high-quality instructional materials, as well as curriculum-aligned professional development. Within our network, all states in the IMPD network have a shared vision that every student engages in meaningful, affirming, grade-level content every day. I wanted to start by just talking a little bit about what high-quality instructional materials are. While states within our network have slightly different language when describing the definition of high-quality instructional materials, they all include the same core components. So on this slide, you'll see that HQIMs are aligned to the state's academic standards. They're aligned to evidence-based best practices in all core content areas. And this looks different based off of the subject area. So when we're talking about reading foundations, this includes things like having print concepts and letter recognition, phonological awareness, phonics, word recognition and analysis, and then decoding accuracy, automaticity, and fluency. For ELA, this includes appropriate text complexity, strong text quality, and text that builds knowledge and vocabulary. For math, this includes a focus in coherence, rigor in mathematical practices, balance among conceptual understanding, procedural skill and fluency, and application. And then for science, this includes that 3D learning, so science and engineering practices, cross-cutting concepts, and disciplinary core ideas, as well as phenomena and problems that drive learning. Many studies have shown that HQIM can lead to better student outcomes, and in the hands of an effective teacher, it can double the impact on students. So the research really backs this up, that HQIM are a really effective lever for both teachers and students. In addition to that, HQIM also supports teachers to better help their students. A 2017 study showed that the effect on learning is the same as moving an average performing teacher to 1 at the 80th percentile when teachers are trained how to use HQIM and use it effectively. State education agencies can and should play an important role in ensuring that educators, schools, and districts have access to HQIM and high-quality professional learning to use those materials well. So I want to spend some time in this next section just talking about the role that states play to support school systems with adopting and using HQIM. Within our network, we've seen state actions make a huge difference in supporting districts to adopt and implement high-quality instructional materials. States in the IMPD network have done extensive work to define and signal quality materials. So this can look like states creating a list of quality materials by subject area or pointing districts to a trusted source such as ed reports. They can provide guidance and training for school systems to adopt and implement high-quality instructional materials. Again, this can look like states providing district leaders with training on how to run a strong materials adoption process and support with creating a strong professional development plan for their educators. We've seen states provide lots of grant funds, especially in the last 3 years as we've had lots of ESSER funds at the state level for districts to purchase HQIM and aligned professional development. And support school systems with implementing and monitoring ongoing professional learning. So we've seen several states in the IMPD network that have created tools and processes for school system leaders to help monitor how implementation is going. And finally, states can play a big role in providing exemplars to school systems that are implementing HQIM with integrity. The implementation for school districts and schools can be really, really challenging. And we've seen huge successes with states that are creating connections among districts through things like communities of practice to help them navigate the challenges that they're going to face. To date, the IMPD network supports a total of 13 states across the nation. All states within our IMPD network receive a similar set of supports to help further their work around HQIM and high quality professional learning, including things like getting a seasoned state coach that kind of helps build their strategic plan and help them navigate implementation of that plan. We host convenings for states in the network that really help further state team learning. States have access to grant funds to support the state HQIM strategy. There's a lot of cross-state sharing to further the collective knowledge around these topics of HQIM and high-quality professional learning, and connections to experts in the field to help them navigate the challenges. So states use a lot of external vendors and get a lot of support and capacity through national partners. And so it's part of the network that we bring all those folks together in one room to help further the work. Over time, we've seen that these types of supports in conjunction with a committed state team like Nebraska, which we're excited to highlight in this presentation, are really moving the needle on HQIM access across their states. All IMPD states are over-sampled in RAND's annual American Instructional Resources Survey, or what we call the AIRS, where teachers are asked if they use standards-aligned instructional materials in math as well in ELA. What we've seen most recently is that 10 out of the 12 sampled IMPD states saw a greater proportion of teachers using at least one fully aligned curriculum as compared to the national average in math. So we really do see that these types of supports are working and that states are really moving the needle on HQIM access across their states. Nebraska is one of the first 8 states to join the IMPD network. So they've been in the network since 2017 and have really made impressive strides in using the key actions that I highlighted on the previous slide to educate their school districts about the importance of HQIM. So I'm actually going to turn it over to Marissa here to provide a little bit more context and detail about what they're doing in Nebraska on this front.
Thank you, Leslie. What you're seeing here is just kind of a screenshot of our homepage to our website, and we'll just call this kind of the product of our, although there's a lot more to it, but kind of the product of our 6 years of work within the CCSSO IMPD network. But one of the first things that we did, and this was around our effort to really define and signal quality, is we established our Nebraska Instructional Materials Collaborative. So this is our big web page. We've got tons of resources here. You'll see we have tabs that have subject-specific resources that can be found within each. All of our reviews link directly to ed reports, so they're not per se our reviews. In Nebraska, we don't review our own materials, but rather we leverage the ed reports reviews for alignment. We've got, in addition to those links, we've got adoption, selection, adoption, implementation steps, even for our subject areas, for example, social studies that don't have materials that are reviewed by ed reports. We still provide some guidance. We've got tons of archived webinars, just lots of information about specific materials. We've got research articles. So this has become, over the last 6 years, really our go-to for district staff and even teachers. You know, in some of our smaller rural districts, the process of selection and implementation really falls to the teachers. So this is a widely used resource. I'll mention too, one of our most popular resources here is under the resources, you'll see an instructional materials map. Every year, since 2018, we have collected data from our 244 districts regarding the instructional materials that are in use in those core subject areas, ELA, math, and science. And so you'll see an interactive map where you can see what materials are in use. And that's just been really helpful, just to kind of see. And of course, it's a heat map of sorts. And so over the last 6 years, it's been really fun to kind of see it lit up with green as more schools select high quality instructional materials. One of the highlights of our work within the network has been our ZERN initiative, our statewide ZERN initiative. So we did use ESSER funds to provide a high quality mathematics material. This was really prompted by the need for schools to have a high quality digital resource as schools were closing and schools were interested in helping students continue learning remotely. We purchased ZERN licenses for all of our 244 districts. And we really saw some tremendous results with that. And it's ongoing, which I'll touch on here in a second. But ZERN partnered with us to do an impact study and found that middle school students who consistently had access to ZERN showed 2.5 times the growth on our NSCAS or our statewide summative assessment. For some student groups, we saw a double-digit increase for Black and Latino students, free and reduced lunch students, English learners, showed much more proficiency or growth in proficiency toward standards than students who did not use ZERN. And then students at the lowest level of math proficiency were 2 times more likely to improve their proficiency level when they consistently used the ZERN resources. And this has been so successful in our state, we were able to find some grant funds to renew licenses for those school districts that had demonstrated consistent usage over the last couple of years.
To complement the RAND AIRS data, IMPD Network states also collect statewide HQIM access data that comes directly from their districts, whereas RAND is a teacher self-reported oversampled survey. And with the last few slides, again, just being sampling of the great work that Nebraska has done, we're really starting to see their data that they collect from all of their districts around HQIM adoptions and access really increasing over time. So again, this is just another indication that the work that they're doing is working and that more teachers and students have access to great materials across all grade levels in math. While most of the IMPD network has really been primarily focused on increasing access to HQIM and aligned PL for core instruction, so what a kid would get in their general education classroom, as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic, schools and districts have truly become overwhelmed with academic recovery strategies to catch kids up, ranging from high impact tutoring to summer school to after school programs and other intervention blocks. And so one of the areas that we're starting to see several of our states kind of shift to is expanding their focus beyond core instruction to better support school districts in creating what we're calling instructional coherence across all academic spaces. In this instance, we're defining instructional coherence as every element of an instructional program. So that means from core instruction to interventions, working in concert, not in opposition, to advance the same set of priorities, goals, and grade level student experiences. In practice in math, what this actually looks like means that a student shouldn't only be focused on something like procedural fluency during an intervention time. Again, as my experience from a teacher, sometimes when we pull those kids out, we would do things like worksheets where they're repeating different problems for math that are really focusing on the procedural fluency component. And rather, what we should be doing during this intervention time is pushing educators to start sticking to those best practices in math teaching, which includes adhering to the concrete to pictorial to abstract approach, what we call the CPA approach, to make sure that we're really helping students access the math when they get into their general education classrooms. So we want to be preparing kids to go into their core instruction where they feel ready and equipped to tackle math that they may have struggled with, as opposed to doing a lot of reteaching on the back end. And that starts with just focusing on good teaching in those intervention spaces. The research also tells us that this type of instructional coherence effectively does accelerate student learning for students missing knowledge or skills. So when those students are able to access that grade level task and content, their performance increased by as much as 7.3 more months of learning. We see that it increases engagement. So research on motivation suggests that students are more likely to engage in difficult work on learning when they're connected, when they have those connected curricular experiences within and among classes. And it also builds student confidence. Incoherent instructional activities can undermine opportunities to gain mastery, and thus the confidence that motivates student learning. So kind of all of these pieces combined that we see in the research really do support this idea of building instructional coherence, both at the state, the district, and within a student's experience throughout their school day. On top of the progress on increasing student access in Nebraska, they've also made really big changes to create this type of coherence at every level, both within the state agency and also ensuring that this is really aligned for their districts and students across the state. So I'm going to turn it back over to Marissa to have her speak a little bit more about some of this coherence work that they've done at the Nebraska Department of Education.
Yeah, thank you. We also, in addition to using some of our ESSER funds around some of our high quality instructional materials work, we also invested in an agency-wide coherence project. And I say agency-wide, but it really started with 4 offices. So teaching, learning, and assessment, which is my team, special education, coordinated student support services, and then coordinated school and district support. That last office there is where our school improvement efforts happen. And so we've really been engaged with just bringing our 4 offices into alignment in all kinds of ways. The messages that schools hear from us are, internal coherence and just bringing a lot of those pieces together. It's been really rewarding work. It's also had its challenges. I would say we're far enough along with our coherence project now that we're really starting to think about how we fold in other departments, other teams, and how we really extend this work out into the next phases. So our biggest kind of accomplishment so far, and it was really our first main objective, was to revise our Nebraska MTSS framework, the multi-tiered system of support. We really felt like that guidance, which our schools rely on heavily, was really where we could demonstrate coherence and really get make some progress in terms of consistent messaging. So our updated framework really clarifies some of the language, makes sure that it's clear and that it reflects our shared definitions and how we talk about certain work streams and things of that nature. It really does strengthen our vision for community involvement. We looked at alignment between Nebraska's accountability system and the problem solving cycles that are inherent in the MTSS framework. We ensured that it better reflects alignment to the whole child model, and then, of course, clarifying evidence-based practices and how to provide support and monitoring.
And the last piece that we'll leave you guys with during this session is just that creating this type of coherence and this level of coherence across an agency, across a district, and within, again, a student's experience is a really, really challenging effort. Among the challenge, we think it's a very worthwhile effort. And CCSSO is really excited to work with states in the IMPD Network to support them through this work. So Nebraska is kind of the first one out of the gate of really getting this work started. But I wanted to leave you all with this quote that we think captures the why for this work really well. And that's to achieve the outcomes we want. We have to bend the system to deliver a more coherent experience for students so they can become more confident and capable learners. So we think this is the right approach to go. We know that the research backs it. We know it's challenging, but we're hopeful that among all of the many supports that have been thrown to teachers and to students during the pandemic, that there's really a time and a need to be able to take a step back and make sure that students are experiencing a lot of coherence throughout their school day. And a lot of that starts at the state level. So again, I think Nebraska has just been a great partner and a great example for showing how this can be done, starting with some of their MTSS framework. Although, there's still a lot to be done outside of that as well when you look at all that happens within a state agency. So thanks again to Marissa for sharing that and to kind of leading the pack here for what can be done at the state level to build more coherence. So thank you all for tuning into this session. We're going to switch now to the live Q&A. So we'll be happy to hear any questions that you guys may have about the IMPD network or anything that the Nebraska Department of Education has done on that front as well. Yes, this is from Doug Van Dyne. He asked, what do you see as the next steps for this work in Nebraska?
Yeah. Well, good to hear from you, Doug. We go way back. So we're really focusing on coherence right now, both within our team, across the agency, and really that's an effort to align the messaging both internally and what we share with the field about the relationships between Nebraska MTSS, high quality instructional materials, strong instruction, the work we do with school improvement. So coherence is definitely an ongoing effort. Some of the things that, and I guess maybe as a follow-up, I would ask next steps toward, well, just if you need clarification beyond what we're prioritizing. I assume that's what you meant, but good question.
Thank you. And the question that I was going to pose to you all as I'm looking at who's joining the session as well, it kind of ranges from district folks to some national partners. What do you guys see as the role that either your state, if you're a school district, or if you're a national partner, maybe one that you commonly work in, what role do you see your state playing in supporting either districts, schools, or educators using high quality instructional materials and providing curriculum-based professional learning? Yeah, there's a good question in the chat here, Marcel. I'll read it out so you can help respond as well. A question in the chat that says, what have been the challenges and successes faced during the implementation period of a new HQIM in districts? There's lots. Marissa, do you want to share kind of your experience in Nebraska, and then I can speak to kind of more broadly what we've seen?
Sure. I'll just use Omaha Public Schools as an example. It's our largest district, serves about 55,000 students. High concentration of a lot of historically marginalized students. And through this work with the IMPD network, we've been able to support them a lot better and more explicitly in their adoption selection cycles. And they're heading into a secondary adoption grades 9 through 12, which we're pretty thrilled about. And I would say just one of the main challenges is just kind of working through adaptive change, especially when you're talking about secondary ELA. Nebraska's not alone in kind of breaking through in that space. There aren't a lot of materials available in 912. Historically, 912 teachers have had a lot of autonomy in what they teach. There's attachments to what they teach. So really kind of changing hearts and minds around why it might be important to use materials consistently, high quality materials, what that means. And then I would say too, a lot of our districts kind of struggle with having a coherent K-12 scope and sequence. Sometimes we have gone in to provide support around adoption, around selection, we're a small district, we're rural, where do we even get started? And then, we quickly learn, well, there's not a K-12 curriculum in place. And so we kind of have to back up and start there. And, before that, even establishing that vision. What do you want for the kids in your district, for the kids in your region? So I would say those are two big challenges, kind of the hearts and minds, and then the that curriculum piece. And that's where we really are focused on coherence. It starts with us as an agency, and then in turn, we want our districts and our schools to understand the relationships between materials, strong instruction, their MTSS framework, things like that. Really good question.
Yeah, and I would just like double tap some of the things Marissa said, that I think for districts that are implementing a new curriculum, sometimes it really can be a hearts and minds type of challenge, because sometimes the curriculum can look so different from what a district or what those teachers are used to using. So we've seen that be a big challenge before. And I think that even extends into the community. I think about math kind of as a specific example, is the way that we know to teach math now looks really different than a lot of the times how we were taught math growing up. And that can be really difficult even for the community if you as a district are rolling out a new HQIM in math, that it's not just going to be educators and the students that are making a big shift there, but it's also the parents when they see the homework come back and it looks very, very different and they're not sure how to help their student with it. So I would kind of double tap that that's a big challenge. And I think one lesson learned that we've reflected on a lot is kind of holistically the IMPD network with the 13 states that we've worked with a lot, is that this isn't just a teacher's initiative. Like you can't just roll out a curriculum and say, well, we'll train the teachers on it and they're going to use it. You really need all levels of a district to be involved, from the chief academic officer at the district office all the way down to school leadership and instructional coaches. And so our states have done, including Nebraska, have done a really, really great job of being really intentional about including all levels of leadership when we talk about adoption of new curriculum and how to set up a strong implementation plan for that. So that's, I think, both one win that we now have, a win with, because we see lots more states doing that type of work at all levels of leadership, but was a challenge initially. What questions or comments do you guys have about our instructional coherence topic? This is, as I mentioned, is a newer, I won't call it a venture, but a newer venture that some of our states are starting to focus on more, with the goal here of really creating connected curricular experience for students. Again, I know we kind of have a variety of folks in the room here watching this, but is this something that you guys experience in your roles as well? Do you see that disconnection during the school day? And are there ways that either your school or district or organization have thought about approaching that? Question from Doug, I'll read it out, which is, how do you see other states getting involved? Where is the interest? Doug, I'm going to ask for clarification. Do you mean getting involved in like the IMPD network, or getting involved in being more hands-on with HQIM and PL at the state level? Either. Okay, I'll try to answer both. It's been actually an interesting moment in time. I have recently done a deeper dive into a lot of the science of reading legislation that's come out, as I'm sure you guys have as well, kind of at various levels as you're in our larger education field. And it's been interesting because much of that legislation has actually required or pushed states kind of more into this space of how do you help signal quality early literacy materials to your districts and schools? How do you provide really specific supports and professional development so they know how to use those materials well and get training on the science of reading? And so those types of strategies that, again, you guys are probably familiar with, at least some of the science of reading legislation that might be in your state. Those types of strategies are very, very similar to the strategies that our IMPD states have used over the last 6 to 7 years. So I think nationally there is a larger shift to high quality instructional materials because it's such a good lever for ensuring that classroom practice actually changes, like specifically when we're talking about early literacy, but even more broadly. And I think more and more people are starting to see that and also see the outcomes of that. We just shared a little snapshot of Nebraska's outcomes, but that is similar across all of our IMPD states. And it's like really clear that, and it's not rocket science when anybody thinks about it, but if we provide good materials and train teachers on how to use them well, kids do much better when they're held to the occasion to think more strategically and be better students, that they meet us there. And that's been proven time and time again in the research. So I think there's a lot of momentum nationally that people are starting to see that and want to continue to shift to understand how they can make that happen in their state. The cool thing about the IMPD network is this looks really, really different by state, as you can imagine. And kind of every state has taken their own little state-specific strategy and implemented it in a very different way, but all in service of the same goal. So that's kind of my view on how other states are getting interest in HQIM and PL more broadly. For the IMPD network, we kind of started this as a coalition of the willing for states that wanted to make a difference on this front. I was not here when it started in 2017, but worked on the state side with Texas, who is a part of this network as well. And so I think we're eager to continue learning where there is state interest, where states are really, really committed to making change on this. I'll just say that the states that we have kind of at the chief level at a state agency are committed to making change on this front. And so that's the level of commitment that we look for as we're, looking what other state agencies might want to be engaged with our network specifically, but also hoping to continue sharing out the lessons learned as we go as well. And I saw we got a 30-second warning. So if there's any other questions, we'd be happy to take them. And some of these we may have to follow up if we can do that.
Yeah, and I don't know if contact information's been shared, but if I don't have access to the chat, but please feel free to share my email address if anyone wanted to follow up that way.
Yeah, and real quickly before we close, for Stephen, we did have a slide. I don't know if you were on here, but it went by pretty quickly. But we do actually have a slide that pretty clearly defines what HQIM looks like in math specifically as well. So I'd refer back to that. I think you guys should have access to the slides, or at least this recording, to go back there and look at that. And there's a lot of other good examples of that too that I can probably follow up with if you want to reach out.